Hello and welcome back to this episode of the Happier Ever After series. Today we're talking about something that many people experience after loss, but very few people feel able to name: comparison, judgment, and the invisible rules that seem to appear around grief, especially after the death of a partner. If you've ever felt watched, measured, or quietly assessed for how you're grieving, this episode is for you. Because one of the most painful aspects of life after loss is not just the grief itself, but the sense that there is a right way to do it, and that you may be getting it wrong. Often without anyone saying it out loud, grief does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in families, friendships, communities, and workplaces. And with that comes comparison. You may notice yourself being compared to others, other widows, other bereaved people, other timelines. Sometimes that comparison comes from outside. Well, she went back to work really quickly. They started dating again after a year. I know someone who never took time off at all. And sometimes it comes from within. Why am I still struggling when others seem to cope? Why do I feel okay when others still falling apart? Comparison can creep in quietly, and before you know it, it's shaping how you see yourself, and rarely in a kind way. One of the most damaging myths about grief is that it follows a universal path, that there are stages that you move through in order, that there is progress you're meant to make, that time should look a certain way. And when your experience doesn't match that imagined trajectory, judgment often follows, either from others or from yourself. This can be particularly pronounced for widows because widowhood seems to carry a set of unspoken social rules, rules that are rarely named but often enforced. You may have felt them already. Don't grieve too loudly, it makes people feel uncomfortable. Don't grieve too quietly, it looks like you didn't care enough. Don't move forward too soon, it's disrespectful. Don't stay stuck too long, it's unhealthy. There is an impossible contradiction here. Whatever you do, it can feel wrong, and that tension can create enormous pressure. You may find yourself constantly monitoring your behavior. Am I talking about them too much? Not enough. Am I crying too often? Am I too composed? Am I allowed to enjoy this yet? This kind of self surveillance is exhausting and it often leads to people editing their grief. They hide parts of themselves, they perform being okay, they minimize their pain or their joy, all in an attempt to avoid judgment. I want to say this very clearly. There is no correct way to grieve, and there is no timeline you are meant to follow. The idea that grief should look a certain way or resolve within a certain time frame is not grounded in lived reality. It's grounded in other people's discomfort. Comparison in grief is rarely about you. It's about how safe others feel around pain. When someone sees you grieving differently to how they expect it, it challenges their assumptions. It reminds them that loss is unpredictable, that love has no neat edges, that this could happen to them. And rather than sit with that discomfort, judgment often steps in. Sometimes that judgment is overt. Comments like, "Are you still struggling? Couldn't you be further along by now? That seems very fast." Often it's much subtler. A raised eyebrow, a change in tone, less patience, less curiosity. And those subtle cues can be just as powerful. They teach you that your grief needs to be managed, that it needs to fit within acceptable bounds. This is where phrases like too soon, too much, and not enough come in. They may not always be spoken aloud, but they are felt. Too soon to laugh, too soon to travel, too soon to want connection, too much sadness, too much talking about the past, too much emotion, not enough grief, not enough visible pain, not enough reverence. And the thing is, these judgments often contradict each other. You can be criticized for grieving too deeply and for appearing to cope, which leaves you with no safe place to stand. If you found yourself confused, hurt, or second guessing yourself because of this, it's not because you're fragile. It's because the rules are impossible. I want to say something important here. Judgment in grief often comes from people who have not lived what you're living. They may be drawing on ideas, on stories they've heard, on what they think they would do. But grief is not theoretical, it's embodied, it's relational, it's shaped by your nervous system, your history, your relationship, your responsibilities, and your capacity. Your grief will not look like anyone else's, and it doesn't need to. Comparison can also turn inward. You may find yourself comparing today's version of you to who you were last year. I should be stronger by now. I should be coping better. Why am I still here? This internal comparison can be just as damaging because it assumes a straight line. And grief is anything but. Grief moves in cycles, in waves, in expansions, in contractions. You can feel steady one week and undone the next. That doesn't mean you're going backwards, it means you're human. Another layer of judgment comes from the idea that growth should be visible, that healing should be productive. Returning to work, setting goals, being positive. And while those things may be part of some people's journeys, they're not universal markers of health. Sometimes the most profound healing is invisible. Learning how to breathe again, learning how to sit with quiet, learning how to trust your body. These things don't show up on the outside, but they matter deeply. I want to talk now about reclaiming your right to your own timeline, because this is where real freedom begins. Your grief does not need to make sense to anyone else. Your pace is not something to justify. You do not need permission to still be struggling or to begin to feel lighter. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to have good days and bad days. You are allowed to want more from life and to miss what you lost. Reclaiming your timeline means stepping out of comparison. It means noticing when other people's expectations are shaping your choices and gently questioning whether they're actually yours to carry. You might ask yourself, am I doing this because it feels right for me or because I'm avoiding judgment? That question alone can be incredibly clarifying. I also want to say this. You do not owe anyone consistency in your grief. You do not need to be the same version of yourself week to week. Grief is dynamic, and trying to freeze it into something predictable for the comfort of others will only disconnect you from yourself. If you've been feeling watched, assessed, or judged, I want you to know this. Your experience is valid. Your grief is legitimate. Your timeline is yours. You are not behind. You are not doing it wrong. You are not failing some invisible grief test. Those rules were never yours to follow. If, as you're listening to this, you feel relief or anger or sadness or recognition, pause for a moment. Notice your body, notice your breath. Notice that you don't need to change anything today. Reclaiming your timeline is not about a rebellion, it's about permission. Permission to grieve honestly, permission to live truthfully, permission to stop measuring yourself against standards that were never designed for you. If you'd like some support as you navigate life after loss, you can explore the guides that are available on the hub, happiercoach.com/happier-ever-after. They're all there on the hub for you to access. You are allowed to take the time you need. You are allowed to grieve in your own way. You are allowed to stop explaining yourself. Thank you for being here with me today. I'll be with you again in the next episode. Until then.